You're watching Fugitive Red Eye, and today I wanted to talk about cynicism. Now, cynicism often gets conflated with nihilism, and to be fair, there's obviously some overlap. I find nihilism to actually be a lot more cringe, because nihilism is basically like that Rick and Morty thing where it's like, nothing matters, let's watch TV. I think the key distinction I would make between the two is that with cynicism, it's not really the realization that nothing matters, but it's more so the realization that things are terrible, and there's not really anything you can do about it. It's not that it doesn't matter, it's that you really can't change a whole lot of it, and that things suck. Cynicism, I would argue, is more negative than nihilism, but I would argue it's more realistic. What do I mean by all of this? Because, I sound like I'm just being like a cringe fucking, Debbie Downer here, but, the world is a fucked up, dark, and, constantly changing place. And changing, I would argue, for the worse. Things have gotten progressively worse over my lifetime, and I've only seen it downward spiral. Each generation, I think, gets progressively stupider, more technology dependent, and less productive. People get all caught up in these fake causes where they have these ideas they want to fight for, but at the end of the day, it's just team sports, but with a let's change the world LARP going on. Another thing that obviously overlaps with cynicism is pessimism. Pessimism is the opposite of optimism. I assume you know what pessimism is, but I'll give a brief rundown anyway. Pessimism is basically just being negative and thinking that things will often have the worst outcome. But you look at society now, and everyone is tied to technology. Everything that we have makes our lives more convenient, and it does give us a better quality of living in the short term. But in the long term, what it really does is it makes us dependent, and it makes us stupid and unable to actually work in the real world. The more technologies that get introduced and innovated, the more often people are going to forget how to do the manual versions of those tasks and just rely solely on the technology. Obviously, I'm not saying all technology at its core is bad, and I use technology all the time, right? I'm a YouTuber, right? I go online, I stream, I play video games, I watch movies, I review movies. Watching and reviewing and collecting movies is a hobby of mine. But I don't see that as anything other than the escapism that it obviously is. When you're getting into movies and video games and making videos and stuff, really it's just to deal with the fact that reality sucks. And I know that that's not really like a new concept to say that reality sucks, but it fucking does. Constantly people will join up with causes thinking that they're making a great difference in the world, when in the grand scheme of things, they're not. And if they are, it's typically for the worse, at the detriment of society. I talk to my friend all the time, who's a lot more of an optimist than me. And let me be clear, I'm not fully, black-pilled. I don't think that it's hopeless. There is still hope. But I do talk to my friend a lot, who's a lot more optimistic than me. And, he will constantly bring up all these points on how things could be better and how, new technology, it's still in its infancy. If we adapt and learn with it, it'll get better. And, there's not inherently a falsity in that statement, but I think it's a little naive to act like just because the internet's new, it's somehow going to get better. Ever since the internet has been expanding, social media has made our lives demonstrably worse. Relationships are at an all-time low between the sexes. Mental illness is at an all-time high. You don't see people going out and actually doing things a lot of the time anymore. People are fat, stupid, and docile. And like I said, I'm fully aware that I'm not, part of the exception in some regards. I mean, I'm overweight. I'm not the most active person in the world, and admittedly, I'm not as productive as I should be. When you look back at previous generations, at my age, right, I'm nearly 30, and when my parents were my age, they already had 2 kids and a house. Now, granted, I have a house, but I'm not married, I don't have any kids, there's nothing like that going on. My job isn't exactly a career. My dad had a retirement, he had a pension, right? Good luck getting that in today's day and age. Nowadays, the best you're gonna have is like a 401k or an IRA or something like that. Pensions, no, forget it. It's not gonna fucking happen. It's either you do the 401k, the IRA, or you go on Social Security and become a leech on the taxpayer, which I'm also not a fan of. The dollar is losing value, obviously. There's constant tension because, there's all sorts of people getting involved in things we shouldn't, and all sorts of, conflicts and problems that arise because people get distracted by dumb shit. It's like People will it's like the government jingles keys in front of your face to distract from all the horrible shit they're doing, to make you think, oh yeah, things are alright. Like, obviously, for a little bit of optimism here, things are better in a lot of ways. Like, a poor man today lives better than a rich man 100 years ago. That's just a fact, with the quality of life getting better, right? But as a society, as a culture, we're way less cohesive than we ever were. There's no shared values. Everyone hates each other. Nobody gives a shit about their neighbor. You don't really see a sense of community anymore. Everyone is just, out for number one. And, like, again, I advocate that to a degree, but when it's on a societal scale and there's literally no common values or community, it's not going to be a long-lasting endeavor. People are just going to, like, eventually societies collapse. I've become so cynical to that fact that, people will be like, oh, well, when this happens, then things will change. Like, for instance, people will say, oh, well, when enough trans surgeries backfire and kids come back years down the line, then it'll have a shift. It's like, who are you kidding? These things just move in one direction so far. Like, I'm not saying that they can't change. I'm not saying that there won't be backlash. But look at the position on abortion just 10, 15 years ago. The Democrat position on abortion used to be safe, legal, rare, and I was already against that because, again, as you know, I am pro-life. But now it's like abortion on demand at any time for any reason. And if you even question that, you're called like a bigot. You're told you hate women. It's dismissed as women's health care when that's the last thing it is. It's not that at all. It's literally just going in, violently scrambling and killing a baby and sucking it out. But if that wasn't enough to get people outraged enough to make a difference, why the hell would cutting off their genitals? To me, I don't see why it's going to do anything other than continue to shift the goalpost. The slippery slope everyone always dismissed as a fallacy, I don't think is a fallacy. I think it's true. I think for a while we were just going down a slippery slope, and then eventually we hit a cliff and just fucking plummeted off that. And now it's just the rate at which we're falling off said cliff. People tell me that things will get better with, the sexes and stuff, right? With the whole believe women and Me Too bullshit that happened. I've heard people try and say, oh, I think that's basically over. It's like, why do you say that? Oh, because Johnny Depp won. You're telling me because Johnny Depp, who's super rich, super attractive, super popular, because he won a defamation case, that gives you hope that the average Joe isn't going to get fucked over? That gives you hope that literally anyone else isn't going to get fucked over? This shit still fucking happens. What are you talking about? Not to mention the fact that Johnny Depp still lost his job. He's still not Captain Jack Sparrow. You don't see Disney taking him back anytime soon. He still took a major hit to his reputation. The damage was fucking done. Like, it's super fucking naive to me to act like, oh yeah, things are just better now. Like, I'm fine taking the small victories when we can get them. The Johnny Depp thing is a victory, but in the broad scale of things, it means nothing. People have no sense of personal accountability, especially women. But if people have something they can do, that they can use their identity as a crutch, they'll do that. Like, if someone can dismiss your criticisms as any sort of racism or some sort of made-up phobia, they will, because that way they don't actually have to acknowledge the fact that they're a shitty person. The structure of society is shifting, and it's probably going to collapse. Simple things, lots of little things contribute to it, right? There's feminism, obviously. There's immigration, which, again, don't get me wrong, I don't mind some immigration that's happened over time, but I think that we're overly reliant on it, and I think that it causes a problem when people immigrate here and then they don't actually try to assimilate. Like, I know that's a common thing, that's a common talking point when people talk about immigration on the right. But for instance, there's plenty of people that I work with that don't speak English. How am I supposed to evaluate or talk to or instruct people as a supervisor if they don't understand what the hell I'm saying? A guy actually got hurt yesterday, and I'm willing to bet they're gonna ask me, well, why didn't you evaluate him on a safety forum like you have been with everyone else? It's like, how am I supposed to evaluate someone who doesn't fucking understand me? Now, that said, that guy actually doesn't work my shift typically. Like, he's a guy volunteering from the morning shift, and maybe management who does speak Spanish has done some sort of evaluation on him. But the point is, I couldn't talk to the guy after he hurt himself because I don't know what the hell he's saying, and he doesn't know what the hell I'm saying. His work ethic is fine, but you really should speak the language to get a job. Like, how can you expect to function in a workplace without... And people will dismiss it when you say that as racism or hate, and it's like, how? What is hateful about that? You want what's best for everybody. It's a negative for everyone involved if we don't understand each other. But that's just the thing with people taking up these fake causes and this fake moral outrage. It's just what people do nowadays. They find a reason to get mad at you for literally nothing, and then they get mad at you when you actually want to try and make things better, because the risk that making things better is harder, and people want the path of least resistance. My house that I bought just 2 years ago at this point, a little less than 2 years, but my house that I bought cost 4 times as much as my parents' house that they bought just 10 years ago. So that tells you just how much we're in the fucking gutter. Inflation and like problems with the market are just going to continue amping up and getting worse. The dollar will continue to devalue, and then we'll keep getting involved in foreign conflicts we have no business being involved in, and then things are eventually just going to come to a head where we're either going to collapse, there's going to be some sort of civil conflict, or, I mean, let's face it, a very likely scenario is people will just be fucking submissive, give into it, and then we'll just have an authoritarian regime ruling over us and nobody fucking does anything about it. Lots of people like to talk big, but when it comes down to it, how many people actually have the balls to fucking stand up for what they believe in? How many people actually have the balls to actually fucking put their money where their mouth is? Not a lot, and this is not me doing any sort of call to action. I'm not saying anything specific, obviously. I'm saying that people talk a big game, but when it comes down to it, they don't do anything a lot of the time. Or if they do, it's very minimal. And they'll take a small victory. And like I said, small victories can be great. They can be cathartic. There are plenty of little small victories that people get here and there that I think are good. But at the end of the day, with no shared morals, no cohesive community, and just complete and total division and apathy towards each other, is just going to lead us down a road where eventually society is either going to collapse or become something far worse. Yeah, I guess that's all I really have to say about cynicism. Originally, I was planning for my cynicism video to actually also tie into why the comedian is the most relatable character in Watchmen, and it's mainly because of cynicism. But I think that the comedian video I'm going to do a little bit differently later on. But suffice to say, the comedian's right, it's all a joke. It's all a fucking joke.
Subscribe to Fugitive Red Eye.